My name is Ethan Hayes. Was a pretty average guy from Poughkeepsie, New York. 32 years old, worked as a mid-level accountant at a firm downtown, lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment with a grumpy, overweight tabby cat named Mr. Whiskers. My life was the epitome of routine. Wake up, coffee, commute, work, commute, microwave, dinner, TV, bed, repeat. Weekends were for laundry, grocery shopping, and the occasional awkward Tinder date that never went anywhere. I wasn't unhappy, per se, just unremarkable. I was the human equivalent of beige wallpaper. That all changed on a Tuesday. Not a particularly special Tuesday, mind you. It was late October, the kind of day where the sky is a perpetual sheet of grey, and a damp chill seeps into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. I remember leaving the office around 6 p.m, the usual crush of commuters jostling for space on the sidewalk. I was halfway across the crosswalk when it happened. There was no warning, no screech of tyres, no shout of alarm, just blackness. A sudden, all-consuming void. It wasn't like falling asleep, it was like being erased. One moment I was Ethan Hayes, worried about whether I had enough frozen dinners to last the week, and the next I was nothing. Or so I thought. The nothingness wasn't empty. It wasn't silent. It was our presence. A vast, incomprehensible presence that dwarfed anything I could have ever imagined. It wasn't malevolent, not in the way you might think of a monster or a demon. It was simply there, and it was aware of me. I had no body, no senses in the traditional way. I couldn't see, hear, smell, taste, or touch, but I could perceive. I perceived this presence, this immensity, and it perceived me in return. It felt like being a single drop of water swallowed by the ocean, a grain of sand on an infinite beach. Time had no meaning. There was no past, no future, only an eternal, all-encompassing present. I existed as a point of awareness within this thing, and slowly I began to change. The first sensation I can recall, after the initial shock of non-existence, was a feeling of expansion. My awareness, that tiny point of ness, began to spread, to diffuse into the surrounding presence. It wasn't painful, but it was profoundly unsettling. I felt like I was dissolving, losing the boundaries of who I was. Then came the visions. I can't call them dreams, because I wasn't asleep. They weren't memories either. They were experiences. Fragments of lives, moments in time, all swirling around me. I saw a Roman soldier marching in formation, his face grim under his helmet. I felt the scorching heat of the desert sun on his skin. I experienced the fear and adrenaline of a woman giving birth in a dimly lit hut, the smell of sweat and blood thick in the air. I was a child, laughing and playing in a field of wildflowers, the scent of summer grass filling my nostrils. These weren't just images, they were complete sensory immersions. I was these people experiencing their lives, their emotions, their fears, and their joys. And then, just as quickly as they came, they were gone, replaced by another fragment, another life. I began to understand, in a way that transcended words, that this presence, this void, was a repository of all experience, of all consciousness that had ever existed. It was the collective unconscious of the universe, a vast, swirling ocean of memories, emotions, and sensations, and I was adrift in it, lost in its immensity. There was a sense of ancientness to it, a feeling that this presence had existed long before the first stars ignited and would continue to exist long after the last galaxies had faded away. It was humbling, terrifying, and awe-inspiring all at once. And then I started to see things. Not the fragmented lives, but something else. Shapes, patterns, shifting forms that defied description. They weren't organic, not in the way we understand life. They were geometric, abstract, yet somehow alive. They pulsed with a strange, internal light, and they moved with a purpose that I couldn't comprehend. These forms seemed to be organizing the experiences, the fragments of lives. They were sorting, categorizing, weaving them into a tapestry of something. I couldn't grasp the overall design, but I sensed that there was one, a grand, cosmic pattern that was far beyond my ability to understand. I saw colors that don't exist in our spectrum, heard sounds that were more than just vibrations in the air. They were frequencies that resonated deep within my essence. I guess you could call it. They were the building blocks of reality itself, the raw, unfiltered energy of the universe. One of the most disturbing aspects of this experience was the lack of any other individual consciousnesses. I didn't encounter any other souls or spirits in the traditional sense. There were no friendly guides, no deceased relatives, no angels or demons. Just the presence, the fragmented experiences, and these geometric entities. It was a profound loneliness, a solitude that went beyond anything I had ever experienced in my earthly life. This was not heaven or hell. There no reward and no punishment, just the raw reality of being. I remember, with a strange clarity, a moment when I saw myself. Not the Ethan Hayes who walked across the street, but a representation, a symbol. It was a small, flickering light, barely visible against the backdrop of the immensity. and I understood, with a sinking feeling, that this light was fading. My individual consciousness, my me-ness, was being absorbed, integrated into the whole. That's when the fear truly set in. Not the fear of pain, or even of death, but the fear of oblivion. The fear of ceasing to exist not as a body, but as an individual. The fear of losing everything that made me me. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream and say, "I'm Ethan Hayes!" But there was no one to scream to. I was alone, utterly and completely alone, in the face of something infinite and incomprehensible. And then, as suddenly as it began, the experience shifted again. The geometric forms began to recede, the swirling fragments of life started to fade. The immensity, the presence, began to withdraw. It was like being pulled back from the edge of a vast abyss. The sensation of expansion reversed itself. My awareness began to contract, to coalesce back into that tiny point of me-ness. The colors, the sounds, the overwhelming sensory input began to diminish. I felt a pressure, a tightening, a constriction. It was the opposite of the dissolving sensation I had experienced earlier. It was like being squeezed, compressed, forced back into a container that was far too small. And then I felt something else, a flicker of something familiar, a faint, distant sensation that I recognized from my earthly life. Pain. It started as a dull ache, a throbbing in wherever I was. It grew rapidly, intensifying into a searing, agonizing fire that consumed my entire being. It was the most intense pain I had ever experienced, far worse than any physical injury I had ever suffered. And then, with a jolt that ripped through my very core, I was back. I gasped, my lungs burning as I drew in my first breath in what felt like an eternity. My eyes snapped open, blinded by a harsh, white light. I was lying on my back, surrounded by a cacophony of sounds. Beeping machines, hurried footsteps, and muffled voices. I was in a hospital, and I was alive. Or was I? How long I had been, as far as my mind was concerned, I couldn't tell. I tried to say something, but my voice was weak. Only air passed through my throat. A nurse, blurry at the edge of my vision, saw my eyes open, and in a second, a doctor pushed past her. The last thing I remember was a needle and a voice. "Welcome back, Mr. Hayes, you've been gone for 30 days. Then the black came back, but it was different. This was sleep, and for the first time since this began, I was scared of what I might see. Part 2. The echoes and the empty room. When I woke again, the harsh fluorescent lights were still there, but the immediate frenzy had subsided. I was in a private room, the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor a steady counterpoint to the muffled sounds of the hospital outside. My body felt like it had been run over by a truck, then put back together by someone who'd only read the instructions halfway through. Every muscle ached, and my head throbbed with a dull, persistent pain. A middle-aged nurse with kind eyes and a name tag that read Sarah was checking my IV drip. She smiled when she saw me looking at her. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes. Or should I say afternoon? You've been giving us quite a scare. 30 days." My voice was a raspy croak, barely audible. Sarah nodded. "You were hit by a car. A pretty bad one too. They didn't think you'd make it. You were in a coma, unresponsive. They declared you clinically dead for a short period during the initial surgery. Brain activity flatlined. But your heart, it just kept beating, faintly but steadily. They kept you on life support, hoping for a miracle. And here you are, a miracle. That's what they called it. But the miracle I had experienced was nothing like what they imagined. It wasn't a peaceful journey to a pearly gate, a meeting with deceased loved ones. It was a terrifying, disorienting plunge into the heart of something else entirely. Something that had left me profoundly shaken, fundamentally altered. Their driver, I managed to ask. "He's fine, minor injuries. He said you walked right out in front of him. He didn't have time to stop. He's been incredibly distraught, blaming himself." Sarah's voice was gentle, but I could see the pity in her eyes. Pity for the man who'd nearly died, the man who'd walked into traffic like a zombie. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the image of the crosswalk, the sudden blackness, but it was no use. The memories, or whatever they were, of those 30 days were seared into my mind. The immensity, the fragmented lives, the geometric forms, they were all still there, echoing in the silence of my mind. Over the next few days, I underwent a battery of tests. MRIs, CT scans, EGs, neurological exams. They poked and prodded me, trying to find some explanation for my miraculous recovery. They found nothing. My brain was, according to them, perfectly normal. No sign of trauma, no lingering damage. "It's like you just rebooted," Dr. Miller, my neurologist, said with a perplexed frown. "Like a computer that crashed and then suddenly came back online." But I knew it wasn't that simple. I wasn't the same Ethan Hayes who had walked into that crosswalk. Something had shifted within me, something fundamental. I felt different, hollow in a way, like a part of me was missing, left behind in that vast, incomprehensible void. The fragmented experiences, the visions, continued, though they were less intense now, more like fleeting echoes. Sometimes, in the middle of a conversation, I would suddenly smell the sharp, metallic scent of blood and feel the weight of a Roman soldier's armor on my shoulders. Or I would hear the laughter of a child, see a flash of sunlight on a field of wildflowers, and feel a pang of longing for a life I had never lived. These weren't memories, not in the traditional sense. They were more like sensory imprints, remnants of the experiences I had absorbed during my time in the void. They were disorienting, unsettling, and they made it difficult to focus on the present moment. The geometric forms, the entities I had seen organizing the fragmented lives, appeared less frequently, but their presence was still felt. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I would see them, pulsing with that strange, internal light, moving with their inscrutable purpose. The biggest change, however, was the emptiness. The profound sense of solitude that had permeated my experience in the void had followed me back into the world of the living. I felt disconnected, isolated, even when surrounded by people. It was as if a wall had been erected between me and the rest of humanity, a barrier that prevented me from truly connecting with anyone. My family and friends visited, of course. My parents, my sister, a few close colleagues from work. They were relieved, overjoyed that I was alive. They talked, they laughed, they cried. But I felt like an observer, watching them from a distance. Their emotions, their concerns, seemed trivial, insignificant compared to what I had experienced. I tried to explain it to them, to describe what I had seen, what I had felt, but the words failed me. How could I convey the immensity, the incomprehensibility, the sheer otherness of it all? They listened patiently, nodding their heads, offering words of comfort. But I could see the confusion, the disbelief in their eyes. They thought I was suffering from some kind of post-traumatic stress, some form of delusion brought on by the accident. "You've been through a lot, Ethan," my sister, Sarah, a different Sarah, said, holding my hand. "It's going to take time to process it all. Maybe you should talk to a therapist." A therapist. The idea seemed absurd. What could a therapist possibly understand about what I had experienced? How could they help me navigate the existential terror, the profound sense of alienation that now consumed me? After a week, I was discharged from the hospital. I returned to my apartment, to my grumpy cat, Mr. Whiskers, who greeted me with an indifferent meow and a demand for food. The apartment felt strange, familiar yet alien. It was like stepping back into a life that no longer belonged to me. The first night back was the worst. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the apartment pressing down on me. The fragmented experiences, the echoes, were more intense and the darkness more vivid. I saw faces, heard voices, felt sensations that were not my own. And then I saw it. It was faint, at first, just a flicker at the edge of my vision. But as I focused on it, it grew stronger, clearer. It was one of the geometric forms, one of the entities I had seen in the void. It was smaller than the ones I had seen before, about the size of a basketball, but it pulsed with the same strange, internal light. It was in my bedroom. It hovered in the corner near the ceiling, slowly rotating. It wasn't solid, not in the way we understand matter. It was more like a projection, a holographic image. But it was real. I could feel its presence, its awareness. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't dreaming. This wasn't a hallucination. It was there. What are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The form didn't respond, at least not with words. But I felt a sensation, a feeling of observation. It was studying me, examining me, just as it had done in the void. I stared at it for what felt like hours, my fear gradually giving way to a strange sense of curiosity. What was its purpose? Why was it here? Was it a guardian, a messenger, or something else entirely? As dawn approached, the form began to fade. Its light dimmed, its outlines blurred, until it was gone, vanished as if it had never been there. But I knew it hadn't. It had been real, and it would be back. The empty room wasn't so empty anymore, and I was no longer alone. But the company I now kept was far more terrifying than any loneliness I had ever known. The realization that what I saw when I died had followed me back into reality. The fear slowly settled in. What will happen now? I am trapped between two worlds. I get out of bed. I am going to find out why I was brought back, and what the thing in my room wants. I looked around the room again, confirming what I already knew. I am not alone. I am not crazy. And I was not going to just sit and wait. The hunt began now. Part 30. The search and the society. The days following the appearance of the geometric form in my bedroom were a blur of anxiety and frantic research. Sleep became a luxury I could barely afford. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside my window sent shivers down my spine. I knew it was still there somewhere, watching me. I could feel its presence, a subtle pressure in the air, a faint hum just beyond the range of human hearing. I started documenting everything. I kept a detailed journal, recording the fragmented experiences, the fleeting glimpses of other lives, the moments when I felt the presence of the geometric entities. I filled notebooks with sketches of the forms, trying to capture their intricate, ever-shifting patterns. I scoured the internet, searching for anything that might shed light on what I had experienced. My search was initially fruitless. I found countless articles about near-death experiences, NDs, but none of them matched my own. Most NDE accounts described tunnels of light, encounters with deceased loved ones, feelings of peace and love. Mine was different, colder, more abstract, more cosmic. I delved into esoteric literature, ancient texts, obscure philosophical treatises. I read about the Akashic records, the concept of a universal consciousness, the theories of multiple dimensions and parallel universes. I explored the writings of mystics, shamans and occultists, searching for any clue, any hint of recognition. I found fragments, echoes of my experience, scattered throughout these texts. The idea of a collective unconscious, a repository of all knowledge and experience, resonated with what I had seen. The concept of geometric forms as fundamental building blocks of reality, as described in sacred geometry and some ancient cosmologies, also seemed to align with my observations. But these were just fragments, pieces of a puzzle that I couldn't put together. I needed something more concrete, something more tangible. Then I stumbled upon a website. It was hidden deep within the internet, buried beneath layers of obscure forums and cryptic links. It was called the Chrono Society. The website was minimalist, almost stark. It contained very little information, just a few cryptic paragraphs about exploring the boundaries of consciousness and unveiling the hidden architecture of reality. There was a contact form, a single email address. Something about it resonated with me, a gut feeling, an intuition that this was more than just another crackpot conspiracy theory site. I hesitated for a long time, staring at the blank email form. What if it was a trap? What if it was some kind of cult? But the alternative, remaining alone, lost in the terrifying mystery of my experience, was even more daunting. I took a deep breath and wrote an email. I described my experience as honestly and accurately as I could. I told them about the void, the fragmented lives, the geometric forms. I told them about the entity in my bedroom. I held nothing back. I sent the email and then I waited. The response came 2 days later. It was short, cryptic, and intriguing. We believe we can help you understand. Meet us at the address below. Tomorrow, 10 p.m. Come alone. The address was for an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Poughkeepsie, near the Hudson River. My heart pounded in my chest as I read the email. This was it. This was either the answer I had been searching for, or a descent into something even more terrifying. The next day crawled by. I spent the hours pacing my apartment, replaying the email in my mind, trying to anticipate what awaited me. Doubt gnawed at me. Was I making a mistake? Was I walking into a trap? As darkness fell, I drove to the warehouse. The building was a hulking silhouette against the night sky, its windows dark and empty. The surrounding area was deserted, the only sound the lapping of the river against the shore. I parked my car a block away, my hands shaking as I turned off the ignition. I walked towards the warehouse, my senses on high alert. Every shadow seemed to conceal a hidden threat. I found the entrance, a heavy steel door that was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest, and stepped inside. The interior was vast and cavernous, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting long, eerie shadows across the concrete floor. I could hear the scurrying of rats in the darkness. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing through the empty space. A moment of silence. Then, a voice. "Mr. Hayes, we've been expecting you." The voice came from the far end of the warehouse. I strained my eyes, trying to see through the gloom. A figure emerged from the shadows, slowly approaching me. As the figure drew closer, I could make out more details. It was a woman, tall and slender, dressed in a dark, tailored suit. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her face was pale and angular, with sharp, intelligent eyes. "My name is Catherine," she said, her voice calm and measured. "And I am a member of the Chronos Society." Behind her, several other figures emerged from the shadows. They were all dressed similarly, in dark clothing, their faces impassive. I counted 5 of them in addition to Catherine. "We've been following your case, Mr. Hayes," Catherine continued. "Your experience, it's not unique. Rare, yes, but not unique." My breath caught in my throat. You know what I saw?" Catherine nodded. "We know about the void, the fragmented lives, architects." I repeated, the word sending a shiver down my spine. "That's what we call them," Catherine said. "The geometric entities you saw, they are caretakers of a sort, organizers. They maintain the structure of, well, let's just call it the other side for now." "But what is it? The other side?" Catherine smiled, a faint, enigmatic smile. "That, Mr. Hayes, is a long story. and one that requires a certain level of commitment. Are you willing to commit, Mr. Hayes, to truly understand the nature of reality, even if it shatters everything you thought you knew? I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing. This was the moment of truth. I could turn back, walk away, try to forget about everything that had happened. Or I could step forward into the unknown and embrace the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that there was more to reality than I had ever imagined. Yes, I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. I'm willing. Catherine nodded. Then come with us, Mr. Hayes. Your education begins now. She turned and led me deeper into the warehouse, the other members of the society falling into step behind us. We walked for what felt like a long time, passing through a maze of corridors and empty rooms. The air grew colder, and the silence was broken only by the sound of our footsteps. Finally, we reached a large, circular chamber. In the center of the chamber was our device. It was a complex arrangement of metal and glass, wires and crystals, humming with a low, resonant frequency. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie, a bizarre fusion of ancient technology and futuristic design. What is that? I asked, staring at the device in awe and apprehension. This, Mr. Hayes, Catherine said, is a gateway, a portal, a window into the other side. My eyes widened. You can go there, to the void. Not exactly, Catherine said. It's more like a controlled observation, a way to interact with the other side, to study it, without being completely consumed by it. And the architects? I asked. Can you communicate with them? Catherine's expression became serious. Communication is a complex issue. They don't think like us. They don't communicate in words. But we can influence them, and they can influence us. She gestured towards the device. We've been studying the other side for centuries, Mr. Hayes. The Chrono Society is an ancient organization dedicated to understanding the hidden architecture of reality. We've learned a great deal, but there's still so much we don't know. And you brought me here because you've seen it, Mr. Hayes, Catherine said. You've experienced the other side firsthand. You have a connection to it, a sensitivity that most people lack. You can help us understand it better, and perhaps, in return, we can help you understand yourself. She looked at me, her eyes piercing. Are you ready, Mr. Hayes, to step through the window? I looked at the device, at the swirling energy within it, and felt a surge of fear mixed with an undeniable curiosity. This was what I had been searching for, the answer to the mystery that had consumed me. I took a deep breath. I'm ready. The members looked at each other, then back to me. You are the first one who saw what was in the room in over 200 years. The architects want something from you, Mr. Hayes. We are here to help you figure it out, and to help us. My mind raced again. They didn't know. But they would soon. The geometric shape in the room, the gateway. I knew what it was now. I had to play along. For now. Part 4D, the revelation and the reckoning. Catherine led me towards the device, the humming growing louder with each step. The other members of the Chronos Society formed a circle around us, their faces solemn, expectant. The air crackled with energy, a tangible tension that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The process is unpredictable, Catherine said, her voice barely audible above the hum. You may experience disorientation, sensory overload, even emotional distress. But we'll be here to guide you, to bring you back. She handed me a small, silver device shaped like a teardrop. Hold this. It will help you focus, maintain a connection to this reality. I took the device, its surface cool and smooth against my palm. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to calm the storm of fear and anticipation raging within me. Catherine gave a signal, and one of the members stepped forward, adjusting dials and switches on the device. The humming intensified, and the air began to shimmer, distort. A circle of light appeared in the center of the device, growing larger, brighter, until it filled my vision. Step into the light, Mr. Hayes, Catherine said, and remember, stay focused. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. Then I took a step forward into the light. The sensation was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was like being submerged in liquid light, a weightless, disorienting freefall. The sounds of the warehouse faded away, replaced by a chorus of strange, ethereal tones. I felt a pulling, a stretching sensation, as if my consciousness was being drawn out, expanded. The fragmented experiences, the echoes of other lives, surged through me, more intense, more vivid than ever before. Then I saw them, the architects. They were there, hovering in the space around me, their geometric forms pulsing with that strange internal light. They were larger than the one I had seen in my bedroom, more complex, more powerful. They surrounded me, observing me, their presence overwhelming. I felt a sense of scrutiny, of being examined, dissected. But something was different this time. There was a purposefulness to their movements, a directionality that had been absent before. They weren't just observing me, they were communicating. Not with words, of course, but with images, sensations, concepts. They were showing me something. I saw the Earth, a small blue sphere suspended in the vastness of space. I saw the history of humanity, a swirling tapestry of lives, of triumphs and tragedies, of creation and destruction. I saw the rise and fall of civilizations, the ebb and flow of empires, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. And then I saw the future. It was a terrifying vision. A future of chaos, of destruction, of extinction. I saw the Earth ravaged by war, by famine, by disease. I saw the collapse of ecosystems, the melting of glaciers, the rising of seas. I saw humanity tearing itself apart, consumed by its own greed, its own hatred, its own short-sightedness. The architects showed me this future, not as a prediction, but as a warning, a possibility, a path that humanity was hurtling towards. And then they showed me something else. They showed me themselves. Not just their forms, but their purpose. They were not just caretakers, organizers of the other side. They were guardians, protectors. They maintained the balance of the universe, the delicate equilibrium between order and chaos, between creation and destruction. And they were failing. The balance was tipping. Humanity's actions, its relentless pursuit of growth and consumption, were disrupting the natural order, pushing the universe towards a state of catastrophic collapse. The architects had been trying to intervene, to influence humanity, to guide it towards a more sustainable path. But their efforts had been largely unsuccessful. Humanity was too blind, too self-absorbed, too resistant to change. That's why they had brought me here. That's why they had shown me the future. They needed help. They needed a messenger. Someone who could bridge the gap between their world and ours. Someone who could communicate the urgency of the situation. Someone who could inspire humanity to change its course. They chose me. I was the first one in 200 years, Catherine had said. The last time the Earth was close to this point. The last time they sent a messenger. And I was the only one who could see the architect in the room. Why the others couldn't see it was because they were descendants of the ones who refused to change. The ones who chose power and greed instead. The society. A group of powerful families who had ruled the world in secret for generations. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The Chronos Society wasn't trying to help me. They were trying to use me. They knew about the architects, about the impending catastrophe. But they weren't interested in saving humanity. They were interested in maintaining their own power, their own control, even if it meant the destruction of the world. The device, the gateway, it wasn't a window into the other side, it was a weapon, a tool they were using to manipulate the architects, to siphon their energy, to enhance their own power. I had to stop them. I pulled the silver teardrop from my pocket, the one Catherine had given me. It was still cool to the touch, but now I felt a vibration, a subtle hum emanating from it. I focused my will, my intention, on the device. I remembered the feeling of connection I had experienced in the void, the sense of unity with all things. I channeled that feeling into the device, visualizing the architects, their message, their plea for help. The device began to glow, to vibrate more intensely. The light around me intensified, the ethereal tones grew louder, more urgent. The members of the Chronos Society noticed. They looked at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and alarm. "What are you doing?" Catherine demanded, her voice sharp. I didn't answer. I closed my eyes, focused all my energy on the device, on the connection to the architects. The device exploded in my hand, a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. I felt a surge of energy, a wave of power coursing through my body. When I opened my eyes, the warehouse was in chaos. The device was destroyed, its metal and glass fragments scattered across the floor. The members of the Chronos Society were staggering, disoriented, their faces contorted in pain. The architects were gone. But I knew they were still there watching, waiting. I turned to Catherine, who was staring at me with a mixture of rage and terror. You betrayed us," she hissed. "No," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I betrayed you, but I saved humanity." I walked away from the warehouse, leaving the Chronos Society behind. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I had a mission. To spread the word, to warn humanity, to inspire change. The architects had given me a message, a responsibility, and I would not fail them. The world outside seemed brighter now. I walked to the street, not looking back. My journey has just begun. The geometric shape, now invisible, follows close behind. My Gordian, my alley, my hope.